We just did the coilovers and now this thing's broken again.
It's not broken.
Never ends. Oh, the airplane's coming over. Today we're working on Jay's E46 M3 again. He hasn't done the cooling system on this car ever since he bought it, so since it has 140,000 miles, we figured it might be a good time to replace the water pump, thermostat, a couple of the O-rings, along with the tensioners and belts, so, since we're going to be down there. So it's going to be a pretty in-depth DIY tutorial in case you ever do it on your car. It's pretty straightforward. You won't need too many special tools. The only one you'll need is for the fan clutch, and we'll link it in the description below. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So with that said, let's just get to it. We're back here on my ground that is beautifully been laid out for almost every video of parts. Essentially, we've got everything to do a full cooling system, restore plus the tensioners and everything. You got the idler pulley, tensioner, another tensioner. You'll need 1 gallon of BMW coolant. Make sure you get official BMW coolant or something similar to it. Do not use like red or anything like that. Make sure you use BMW coolant, don't use anything else. These cars are very sensitive to any other coolant. It can cause issues with the sensors and all that, so make sure you get this. We've got a new thermostat to replace while we're there, and obviously a new water pump. The water pump comes with the metal gasket and the thermostat housing O-ring, which is kind of funny because the thermostat comes with the O-ring as well. But one thing that they don't provide you is you're gonna need 3 small O-rings and a medium-sized O-rings. We'll put the part numbers in the description below as well. But you got to make sure you get these because when you do the water pump, you're going to be removing a couple of hard coolant lines that you need to replace. So don't reuse the old O-rings because if you do, you might risk the chance of you having coolant leaks, and it's not going to be easy taking all this stuff apart again. So just replace them. You don't need that many tools to do this job. You'll just need quarter-inch extension, or quarter-inch ratchet, a couple extensions, some form of a tool to get some push pin clips out, an 8mm socket, 10, 13, and a 16. You'll need a T25 bit drive and an 8mm bit drive. And the only special tool you really need, which you can buy on Amazon for I think like 20 bucks, is the 32mm fan clutch wrench tool and the locking tool that comes with it, so you can get the fan off the car. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it's pretty much nothing crazy. So that's the quick rundown on what the tools you'll need to do this job. So step 1 is she's got a K&N intake filter, but it's the same thing. Just want to remove all this stuff out of the way, get it out. You'll be removing this. There's a couple push pin clips, I believe there's 4, and that comes all out of the way.
By the way, this is a 8mm, if you're wondering.
The way to get these out is you got to get underneath the small one, lift up, and once you lift it up enough, then you can pull them out. Let's see, yeah, there's more stuff. Will be this one. I remember this one. Once you get that, pull that one out. On Jay's car, since he doesn't have the stock air box, we don't have to remove any of this stuff, but if you have a stock one, you have to remove your ballast to get the intake box out to give you enough room to get to this, so just keep in mind. But once you've done that, then this section of the shield has to come off. It's a push clip here. There's another one over here which is a little tough to get to, but once you get to those, that's pretty much it. So right now this cover is loose, but it goes through the radiator hose right here, so you can't actually get it out at the moment. So what you need to do next is start removing this entire garnish piece. It's held on by 4 T25 bolts. There's gonna be 2 up here and then 2 on the bottom. And then you just disconnect this and you get it out of the way, and that's pretty much it. Once you've gotten those T25 bolts on the bottom, you have to come down here and take off this middle panel off. It's just held on by, I believe, 7 8mm screws. Just got to take them off, and that's pretty much it. Once you've got this under tray off, there's gonna be two T25 bolts on the sides of the radiator fan shroud. They're just above the oil cooler, so you can't really miss them. But that's, once you get those two off, this entire thing should be loose enough for you to kind of start wiggling out. You won't be able to get it out until you get the fan off. So, but just make sure you get these two off prior to doing the fan. Rundown on how to use these tools. This 32mm wrench goes onto the big nut that's on the fan. This is essentially the locking tool that you use this side to put the two water pump pulley bolts there to hold it in place while you're loosening this. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty. So once you've gotten the radiator fan shroud pretty much loose like how we've got it here, and this kind of popped off once you get the T25 over here removed, it's pretty much, you have to remove the fan. That's where these two special tools come in. Though do note that the fan is reverse threaded, so in order to loosen this fan, you actually need to go clockwise, and then when you're tightening it, you need to go counterclockwise to tighten it. So make sure you do it that way. If you do it the other way, like, you know, traditionally removing a bolt, you're gonna be fighting it. So just make sure to take note of that. We've got the fan out. Took a little bit of wiggling. You usually get it out this way. We're gonna be working on getting the belts off, but before you do that, make sure, it's a quick pro tip, loosen up the water pump pulley bolts right here. They're a 10mm. It's way easier to loosen them while the belt's still tensioning on the pulley. Don't loosen them all the way, but just makes it a lot easier instead of trying to hold the pulley and loosening it that way. So, pro tip. In order to get the belts off, there's going to be two tensioners that you have to mess with. The AC one is going to be down here. You probably won't be able to see it right now, but more importantly, the other belt, the main belt that runs the alternator, power steering pump and all that, we're going to be right here where my finger is. It's a 60mm bolt inside, and you're just going to be you're going to be essentially using it as a leverage point to get the belt off. You don't actually loosen it. There's going to be a cover that you're going to have to pop off. I use a pick to do that, and then once you pop that off, use a 16 and it's pretty much, it'll come right out. Right now I'm working on the AC belt because this is the one that's in front of the main belt, so this one's got to come off. The tensioner is going to be on the bottom next to the AC compressor. There's going to be a 16mm kind of like a cast bolt. Use a 60mm socket to tighten it, and it will loosen the tension off the belt so you can actually remove it like that. So once you got the AC belt off, next is the actual serpentine main drive belt. It's held on by this tensioner over here. Use a 16mm socket to get on, which is easier said than done. So we got the main serpentine belt off. In order to get that one off, it's not a 16mm like I mentioned, it's an actual 8mm hex bolt, I guess you want to call it. Just use one of these and kind of loosen it essentially, and then it'll come right off. So now that we have all the belts off, we can actually start draining the car and start removing the coolant hoses to get to the water pump and all that, and get all this out as well. We're gonna begin draining the car, and I usually just remove this lower radiator hose down here. In order to do so, there's one sensor here. There's a metal clip on that sensor. You just push it and pops right off like that. And then the harder part, which I recommend getting like some kind of pick like that. It'll make it a lot easier to get on the metal clip down there. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll be able to see it. Once you get it on there, you'll be able to pop it up. And then This is the metal clamp that I was talking about. Can only go one way. And then once you've gotten that, you just pretty much wiggle the hose off and all the coolant will start coming out. So be prepared to catch it below with a couple containers or something. You've gotten the lower hose off, you'll start working on getting this upper one out so you can set this panel off and all this out. You do have one hose coming from the coolant reservoir going all the way to the top radiator hose. You kind of have two options. The way I like to do it is there's another clip here, just like how the lower one was. You pop it out and this comes right out. Just do be careful. It can be kind of fragile, so make sure you don't pull on it too hard. And then that's pretty much it. Now that we're here, we're essentially going to start taking off these hoses as well, make some more room, and then start removing the thermostat housing and all the water pump pulley and all that kind of stuff, and get that out of the way. 6mm for these clamps. Tech tip, if you guys have a hard time getting these coolant hoses off, one way I get these off really easily is I use kind of like a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, and some silicone spray, and I get the flathead underneath the rubber and spray this underneath it quite a lot actually, and I go around the hose and it breaks the coolant bead that is kind of there after being there for so many years, and then you can kind of just easily kind of get them off. Sometimes we like to put up a fight, but they just come out super easy. So I've gotten the water pump pulley off, just removed the 4 10mm bolts, comes right off. Now we're moving on to the thermostat housing. It's hold down by 3 10mm bolts. They're pretty long. As you can see, there's one there, 2 there, and they're all the same, so you don't have to worry about which is which. This comes right off. And then there's also a clip here for the wiring harness to clip onto. If it's like Jay's, the entire protective sheath literally disintegrated as I touched it. So before you take this off, make sure if it's disintegrating, just take it all off so you don't get it into the motor. Before I button this up, I'm gonna put some new one on so it's nice and protected. But once you got that stuff off, you pretty much just have to wiggle it and be prepared for more coolant to come out. And just gotta wiggle just like that. And out she comes. Might be a bit stuck, especially if it's like this car where it's probably never been changed. So this thermostat's stuck inside. And just like that, all good. So this is the actual thermostat itself. It sits right here, and obviously this sits on top. This is where coolant flows through after it reaches a certain temperature. I don't know the exact temperature this opens out for an M3, but essentially this is where all your temperature control and how much flow goes through the radiator. This is just like, this dictates your cold warm up time and all that stuff. So if this starts to get stuck open, coolant is always going to flow through while the car is cold, and the car will take longer to warm up, so that's why it'll throw codes. And it's opposite. If this gets stuck closed, then it will never flow coolant to the radiator. Obviously if it's stuck closed, it will overheat and all that stuff. So Generally, if you're gonna do this one, you might as well do the water pump as well. It's just right below it. So once you get the thermostat housing off, you're left with the water pump assembly. In order to get it off, I believe there's 6 10mm bolts that surround the water pump assembly itself. And then there's also a bolt, there's a 10mm bolt holding a bracket to a hard water line right here. There's gonna be 2, there's one right here and there's one in the back. Just be sure to not damage them when you're pulling this out. And you'll also be replacing the O-rings that are seated in there as well.
Oh, she's bleeding.
And there we go.
Wow, wow, wee, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of heavy.
Oh, it's kind of hot.
Oh wow, this is actually
Bad?
the bearing inside's not good.
What?
The bearing inside's not good. You can actually hear it. Biggest difference on the aftermarket one to this one is that the BMW ones use a plastic impeller. As you can see, even though at 140,000 miles, it really doesn't look that bad. But the actual aftermarket one is a cast metal impeller, which is gonna last a lot longer. So it's actually kind of nice. Some people may say, oh, it might rust or anything, but as long as you use proper coolant and always keep it clean, you shouldn't have any problems. But for now, we're gonna clean all this gunk up because there is a lot of it, and put the new water pump and button it up. Oh yeah, we'll do the tensioners. Once you get the water pump out, you want to clean all the mating surfaces and any dirt that has accumulated, like how we done here. I usually use like a green Scotch-Brite pad. A small chunk of it works great, and I soak it in a little bit of brake cleaner, and it cleans up most of like the gasket sealing. You want to get all that off before you put the new gasket on and the water pump. And once you got it kind of like that, clean it down, and you're pretty much ready to put the water pump back on. Super lube, bro. Never heard of it? Make sure you use super lube.
That's gonna be our ass. I know, man.
So once you've gotten this surface all nice and clean, the next thing before we put the water pump on is to take these old 2 O-rings off. Again, use like a little pick, kind of get on underneath. Just be careful not to mar the mating surfaces that these O-rings sit in. Just like that. There's one. And we just gotta get the other one. Again, make sure you replace these, don't reuse them, don't shortcut and risk saving a couple bucks because these were only $3. Just be sure to replace them. And once you get those off, put the 2 new ones on. Make sure you use super lube or some kind of synthetic grease to lube these up before you put them in. Don't put them in dry because you risk ripping them or rolling them over. Super lube. Here's the new gasket. It's doweled, so make sure you put it in the right dowels, get it nice and flat, and then just got to put it in. Water pump is in. The water pump itself is doweled into the engine block. The dowel's gonna be on the bottom, so make sure you line that up correctly. And then once you do, you can pretty much just pop these 2 hard water lines in. It's super easy. The 2 longer water bolt bolts go on the top, and then the 3 shorter ones go on the bottom, so make sure you get that right, don't mix them up. And then after that, you just torque them to spec. Make sure to torque these to 7 foot-pounds. While you're torquing, make sure you go in a crisscross pattern, don't just go all the way around. So now we've got the water pump all in, finished up, torqued to 7 foot-pounds. Next is going to be putting in the thermostat and the thermostat housing. Again, those are 7 foot-pounds as well. Make sure to lube up the thermostat O-ring and clean up the thermostat housing as well while you're at it. And if you happen to forget which way the thermostat goes, it I think only goes one way. But just make sure the silver part's going in towards the thermostat housing and the spring part goes towards the bottom of the car. Since we're waiting on an O-ring for the thermostat housing, we're gonna work on getting all the tensioners and pulleys off. So we'll begin with this one. It's a 16mm bolt. Just gotta loosen it up and then take it off. It is kind of long, so. And it is keyed as well, so it goes into the little slot right there, so you can't, get it mixed up. So just be wary of that. And that one goes in like that. We'll torque that one later. We'll get to this one down below, which is this big unit. So in order to remove this entire assembly, there's going to be a couple of steps you need to take. The first one is to loosen up this pulley. It's a 8mm hex bolt inside. Once you get it loose, and then let's see if I can get it out already. Once you get those off, it's just, the rest are just 3 13mm. There's gonna be one here, one down here, and then one behind the bracket. You'll kind of have to feel for it if you're gonna replace it. Once you've gotten everything back in, this kind of gets to the tricky part on putting the thermostat housing back in. There's not much room. So what I do is I usually just kind of angle it downward like this with the pipe already in. And I kind of already have the thermostat in as well. And I kind of just start to guide it in slowly. Just want to be sure not to damage or pinch any of the new rubber O-rings, because it's very easy to do. And just gotta kind of get it to fit, which is easier said than done.